ideally, organizations would be neuro-inclusive from the ground up and the top down, right? But we have a lot of work to do. So saying it out loud, like using the words and speaking that into existence is important, because the fact is, as long as you have more than a few employees, you definitely have neurodiversity within your workforce, but you have neurodivergence within your workforce. And your talent pool is, the people coming up through the workforce are really identifying with those labels and are looking for the right thing. So something I said yesterday was, when you search your company's name plus neurodivergent or plus autistic, see what comes up. And what I said was kind of a laugh, but if it's a Reddit or a TikTok post, make sure you're sitting down.
And I feel like it was all the NDers in the room that laughed at that, because they're like, yeah, we exist in those spaces. Hello, welcome to the Neurodiversity in the Workplace podcast. As you can see here, I have a guest with us today, my good friend Dave Thompson, and I'll let Dave introduce himself, and then we'll kind of set the stage of what we're talking about, where we are, why we have an unfamiliar kind of setting around us. But yeah, Dave, so can you tell our listeners who may not be familiar with you, but some surely are, just, who you are, your background, and what brings you to this lovely conference that we're at?
Thanks so much for having me, Sean, and the NITW team. Huge fan and supporter of what you guys do. So again, I'm Dave Thompson. I'm calling myself a neuro-inclusive workplace strategist, but I've been in the field of helping to reshape the world of work for pretty much my entire career, for many years now, since really before we were even using the word neurodiversity yet. Former special ed student, I have ADHD and dyslexia, some sensory issues, and just struggled to fit into the rigid boxes I was expected to within the world of work. So all I could really picture doing was helping to change it. And that's, long story short, how I got here today.
Yeah. And I love that you struggled to fit into those boxes and use that struggle to turn it into a mission and into your work. So where we are today, we are here in Orlando. Us and the team and Dave are at the Disability In annual conference. And we just saw Dave give a talk as part of the Neurodiversity Roundtable session, where Dave's segment was titled Neuroinclusion is Happening With or Without You, which obviously is a really striking title, something that we all very much agree with, and wanted to bring it to the show, have Dave kind of expand on that and unpack it, and we can kind of talk through the nuts and bolts of what does that mean, what does it mean for businesses, what does it mean for the future of work. So maybe just start with the title, like what led you to that title, and what are kind of the sub-bullets that back that up, and what does it mean for listeners?
Yeah, thanks. So the title is a little edgy. I like to shake things up a bit, but it's not a threat. It is just a fact. Neuroinclusion is happening with or without you, as evidenced by the fact that every year when we come back to this conference, that session, that neurodiversity employment session, just gets bigger and bigger. There's just so much energy and enthusiasm around this stuff, and I've been doing this work for as long as the big corporate programs were just getting off the ground, and we've seen a lot change in that time. For example, something that I mentioned was that Google searches for the word neurodiversity itself have gone up by over 1,900% between 2014 and 2024. So that's not just thanks to the incredible trailblazing work of some of those big corporations that got started, but it shows that there's been a culture shift, right? Obviously, there's a lot more late identification of people's cognitive differences. People are discovering their neurodivergent identities later in life, right? And so people are showing up to the workplace with new language, new expectations, new knowledge. So we need to catch up, right? As organizations. And so when I say neuroinclusion is happening with or without you, it really mean in two different ways, as organizations and as individuals, right? Because not everyone has the power to launch a huge program, but we all have some relational power to shape the workplace day to day, right?
I was just going to ask about kind of, okay, if neuroinclusion is happening, it can happen on two sides of that coin, of organizations catching up and what are they doing to either make, and some are falling behind and not making these changes, those that it is happening without. But then also, there's kind of a population and an awareness and even a kind of prevalence and statistical growth that is happening more and more over time. So, and they feed into each other, right? Like we all talk about talent and Gen Z and the prevalence of neurodiversity there, neurodivergence and people self-identifying, and that is such a driver of, it is happening here, and so that creates a need for businesses to have it also happen there, or else there's a disconnect where eventually the businesses will lose that battle.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of us, our partners and allies in this space, have been using that statistic about over 50% of Gen Z identifying as neurodivergent. But a lesser talked about statistic, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting the source, but we'll give it to you for the show notes. A different poll of Gen Zers showed that 80% of Gen Zers are less likely to join an organization that lacks support for health and neurodiversity.
Wow.
And just the fact that they're pairing those two things together, health and neurodiversity, says a lot, doesn't it? Yeah. I think it ties into psychological safety and just overall workplace experience for everyone, because as we know, and I say it every day pretty much, neurodiversity is everyone. So neuroinclusion is for everyone, right?
Yeah. And I think that pairing, because, longer than one can remember, like health benefits have been kind of a baseline expectation of employment of, companies of a certain size, and to pair neuro-inclusive resources and support on that same level, that does say a lot. And it says a lot about either or both how an organization is viewing that, or how the, I guess, candidate market is seeing that as a priority, that it needs to be a part of the package, or else you start to miss out.
Yeah, and I think silence on the word neurodiversity sends a message, both organizationally and individually, right? But a lot of the time, organizations are doing great stuff, neuro-inclusive stuff, without saying the word neuroinclusion or neurodiversity, right? And so a lot of those things are either just great, like flexible policies, like work from home or casual dress codes, or they're tools and resources that are kind of in a back corner somewhere, and maybe aren't even necessarily tied to the words ADHD or autism or dyslexia or neurodivergence, but are some really great stuff. So we need to bring that out into the light, streamline those resources, shed light on those, see what's going on.
That's so true. I'm catching myself as you bring that up. I don't want to name organizations. We usually omit that on the show, but I was just looking into an organization recently out of curiosity of, like, do they have a neurodiversity program? I think that was my primary inquiry. I found nothing about their neurodiversity program. And so I then looked into their careers page, and it had a whole breakdown of how we hire differently, and we use projects, and we let you work on your own time, and we give questions in advance, and that's a perfect example of what you're talking about of, great, it delighted me that this company's doing this, but it is also, they're missing out on the potential to, be a champion of it, and, get the deserved attention of, like, hey, they are doing the right thing. They are being a neuro-inclusive employer. They could be shouting that a lot louder and probably accessing some really valuable candidates that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, ideally, it's kind of like how strategists and consultants like us shouldn't have to exist, but we do, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be done, right? So ideally, organizations would be neuro-inclusive from the ground up and the top down, right? But we have a lot of work to do. So saying it out loud, like using the words and speaking that into existence is important, because the fact is, as long as you have more than a few employees, you definitely have neurodiversity within your workforce, but you have neurodivergence within your workforce. And and your talent pool is, the people coming up through the workforce are really identifying with those labels and are looking for the right thing. So something I said yesterday was, when you search your company's name plus neurodivergent or plus autistic, see what comes up. And what I said was kind of a laugh, but if it's a Reddit or a TikTok post, make sure you're sitting down.
And I feel like it was all the NDers in the room that laughed at that, because they were like, yeah, we exist in those spaces.
Yeah.
We know exactly what you mean.
And I shouldn't say it's all bad, because also I've done that search, and great things have come up from Reddit and TikTok. right? And every individual is different. So, what looks like a great job to Shay Belsky, who was on your show recently, is not a good job for me at all.
Yeah.
I'm not a techie,
Right.
So it's all individual, but we do see trends, as far as the neurodivergent workplace experience at different companies, and we should be paying attention to that.
Yeah, I want to get back to a couple of your talking points from your talk yesterday in just a second, but I wanted to give some focus to, I think, what you were saying about the importance of, like, for lack of a better cliche phrase, saying the quiet part loud, because I was just talking to somebody else at the conference earlier today about just the progress over time and how 5 years ago we were kind of shouting into the void, the corporate, galaxy, neurodiversity is important as a baseline. Like, we should be doing this. You should have a hiring program, like, just take a start, give voice to your ERG to represent and support neurodiversity. And fast forward to 2025 here, that's baseline. So, you and us and all of our, like, S&P friends and allies are usually, I'm finding in my 9 years of working in this space, usually just a couple years ahead of the curve of, like, we need to shout the next steps over and over and over again. And then, 1, 2, or 3 years later, the dominoes start to fall, the companies fall in line and kind of start putting into practice what we've been telling them to over the years. So I think it has been, amid everything, a bit encouraging to me to say, like, that is what we were yelling a couple years ago, and now I'm hearing it come back from the main stage at the big lunch plenary that everybody is at. There's no overlapping events. I'm hearing neurodiversity as a main topic. So even that shows it. But now look at 2025, and we're making the case about, having employee support in place, having interview methodology options in place, and it's going to be that same couple years bounce back time for that message to resonate, take hold, the first dominoes start falling, and then other companies fall in line, and we'll be moving on to the next topic at that point.
That is a very hopeful outlook, and I know I couldn't agree more. My optimism knows no bounds with this stuff, so I agree wholeheartedly. And I also think, we've seen an explosion of employee resource groups over the past couple of years.
Definitely.
I get emails like every week about, like, we decided to make our less formal coalition a thing, and I think another kind of mandate, or another thing that we'll be screaming from the rooftops, is to support and credit and compensate and take those ND voices within your organization really, really seriously,
right.
Because nobody knows neurodivergence at your company better than them, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be big.
That's a really good point. Okay, so back to a couple of the talking points. Rewinding a little bit, you also mentioned kind of the differences between positional power and relational power, which I think is a really, really cool concept, but a little bit maybe obscure up front. So I think could use some unpacking. Can you just kind of, like, open your brain and break that phrase down for us? Yeah.
So I think a good example of relational power is just an ally and a friend that you share a break room or a parking lot or a Slack channel or an email chain with. Like, everyone can do a little bit better as far as making the workplace neuroinclusive, right? Like, even if your organization is doing some great things, anyone in any one of those places can kind of ruin someone's day, right? So we all have individual power to make the workplace experience better for neurodivergence, and we should take that seriously, right? And bigger change comes from people setting examples in that way. And then, of course, positional power is someone who can sign checks, someone who can hire, fire, make big decisions, support, approve and support and fund that ERG or bring in a partner, right? And someone more responsible for what tools, what benefits, what resources are available, or what your job portal looks like, right? And that's a whole other thing. And, but even within people's jobs, people have some swing, which is better than no swing, and we can all be making those little incremental changes to make really, really big progress, and we see that all the time.
Yeah. So, in a like capital N neuro-inclusive environment, there have to be both, basically. We've seen where the leadership, the designated DEI VP, says all the right things, does all the right things, believes all the right things, but there's 20,000 employees that are not hearing or following that message, and so it's the right things that leader is saying kind of ring hollow because they're not being put into practice in the very important small ways. But you can't have it just the other way around either, where there's little pockets of good people doing good things, but they don't have the power to affect structural change, which is really important, especially I think when it comes to external facing, the candidate process, the interview process, the public perception, and I think like cultural normalization of neurodiversity is important. It's something of value. We as a, capitalistic business see this as something that we want to place value on. That message from the top, I guess that would be positional power, also means a whole lot.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen a wide range of scenarios play out, but we would love organizations to have value statements around neuroinclusion, but I've seen it go the way of those not really being followed, and there's a difference between what's on paper and what's really going on. However, when you do have that, top-down, thought leadership, when you do have that on paper, I've worked for an organization that we actually had the values statements on the wall, and they were not just about neuroinclusion, but about innovation and integrity and everything else. And being able to physically point to the wall and say, are we being innovative right now, or are we being person-centered right now, was a great kind of litmus test that we could do day to day as we were making decisions and interacting with each other, and it created a great amount of accountability. But
that is really inspiring, as I feel like a lot of listeners will relate. Like my ADHD brain, if I need to remember something, it has to be so unavoidably in my way. Whether it's a sticky note in the middle of my screen or a reminder, like a calendar event that comes up every single day, clock in, 9 a.m., whatever it may be. But even a value statement, having a way for that to be just unavoidably plastered, you're reminded every single time you look up. It does make a big difference.
I will also, to flex a little bit more, what we did was we made sure that they were very short sentences, and that they had visual aids along with them, so that you could just glance. I mean, everyone had them memorized within the first couple of months. They were in the break room, they were on the shop floor, and everywhere else. So it was and continues to be for almost probably 8 years now at that location. Something that's kind of a hallmark of what they do. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so one other really cool message from your talk that I wanted to include in our conversation today was locking in what you have. And, you can unpack that a little more. What it stood out to me as in kind of translating it into, what does that mean for our practice at NITW? Like, what do we do to try to get that across to our partners? The way that I understood it was, how can you take the top-down statements, the good things on paper that we believe and that we know are right, but lock them in so that if that leader leaves, they are more those practices are more resilient than just that one person. They're more woven into the people and what they're kind of conditioned as like standard procedure at this business. Like having that on the wall is like you can't avoid that being woven into everyone's day-to-day kind of experience in that workplace, as well as in more official policies, more than just the vision statement or value statement. But how is it embedded into like your inclusion statements in job descriptions or in even employee paperwork about employees' rights and all that being in there. But that was my read on it. But can you give us, kind of your thought process behind that lock in what you have message?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Also, I guess it's two things. like I said, a lot of organizations have plenty of neuro-inclusive stuff, right? And practices and policies, right? So considering neurodivergence and your neurodivergent talent pool and your current workforce before getting rid of those things. So we saw a lot of most organizations pivot to work from home during the pandemic, and then we see those slowly going away. And a lot of people are actually losing their jobs because they got the jobs during remote and now they don't want to go back, right? So things like that, or dress codes, or policies, considering how they impact the neurodivergent people that have joined your workforce maybe since before you had them, before getting rid of them. So stopping hemorrhaging in a way, but also being resourceful. Not everyone, a lot of people are saying we really want to do a bunch of stuff and we'd love to talk, Dave, but we don't have a lot of budget, right? So being resourceful as far as what you have, that includes that you have neurodiversity. So saying it out loud, you have neurodivergence, just acknowledging that goes a really long way. And you have folks that want to be of help. You have in-house experts about the neurodivergent experience at work. So making sure that those people feel heard, don't get bitter and leave. And, we both can probably think of a bunch of examples of talent that's been lost because they didn't feel heard or safe to show up or taken seriously, or that they couldn't contribute in ways that they knew would add value. You have people. Right?
Yeah.
Not to make it, too big or too cliche, but you have people, and we want to keep it human, and kind of reflect on what works and keep that, and then what doesn't and change it. Right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of
And
the
I think
basics of what we do.
a lot of those things that you're mentioning too, that are difference makers between saying and doing, and act like having a program, having one person responsible for that, versus actually walking the walk and being an inclusive place that people want to work and that people can stay at long term, as you're describing. A lot of the things that make that difference are not hard, they're not expensive, but they have to be done consciously, like remembering to, say the word, to include it in your job descriptions, that neurodiversity is included in, respected identities that we value at this company. They're small things, but they're never done by accident. Well, they are, as you said, they are sometimes done by accident, but even when they are, they're better if they are cognitively acknowledged, I would say.
Absolutely. I agree. And it also kind of goes the other way, where the changes that we want to make help every single person. Yeah. So, not thinking of that as this heavy lift for this certain population, even though it is the right thing to do and the smart thing to do, just because of how you're going to affect the workplace experience and open it up to so many more people, but also that I can't name one best practice in neuroinclusion that we all evangelize that isn't just good stuff for everybody.
Yeah,
right?
And that goes right back to one of those things that all of us were shouting into the void, maybe even more recently, 3 years ago. And then what are we hearing today? Like, oh, neuroinclusion's good for business. Neuroinclusion's good for everyone. Skill-based hiring is universal design. All of these things. So again, maybe a bit of optimism to round us out. That. We are always fighting uphill, but we are kind of always we're always continuing to move uphill.
Oh yeah, unrelenting.
Yeah,
continuously unrelenting.
Well, that is why we love you, Dave. You are unrelenting. You have been for years. You've been kind of shouting alongside us and helping lead the way. And this conference, your talk, and being here today, we appreciate everything that you do. And it's making a big impact, and we really value your contribution.
Samesies with you.
Thanks, Dave.
Can't say enough. Thank
Cool.
you so much, everyone.
Well, yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Thank you again, Dave, for giving us some of your time, and we'll see you on the next episode.